Hi and welcome to part 4. So, after reaching their creative peak with Revolver and Sgt. Pepper, they continued their winning streak with All You Need Is Love. This song definitely feels like it's from the same era as Sgt. Pepper with its complex arrangement, but the difference is that the music on Sgt. Pepper was designed so that you couldn't play the songs live, while this song was not necessarily written for, but it was performed on the Our World satellite show. And while they did pre-record a backing track, it was mostly a live performance, and so this song marked a return to the fundamental qualities that made them great in their early years, particularly with regards to the connection with the listener, which hadn't really been the driving force behind their music since probably around the Hard Day's Night album, and John Lennon delivers one of his best vocal performances. Hello Goodbye almost seems a bit of a throwaway in amongst all the amazing music they were making around this time. And yes, the melody and lyrics are a lot simpler than most of the music they were making at the time, but I find this song to be similar to 8 Days a Week. After all the Sgt. Pepper stuff, I think Paul just wanted to write a really great, solid pop song while still maintaining a level of creativity, and the Beatles succeeded in that brilliantly. And so we come to the Magical Mystery Tour EP. The Magical Mystery Tour title is usually associated with the album that Capitol Records put together by adding the singles that the Beatles released in 1967. But in the UK, it was originally released as a double EP containing only the songs from the film, and since it is the UK releases that we are talking about in this review, it's the EP we'll be talking about here. However, trying to judge the EP as a single entity is pretty useless since the EP never really developed as an art form in the same way that the album did. So we're basically just talking about the songs that appear on the EP. The title track was written to open the Magical Mystery Tour film, and it worked very well in that context, but it isn't one of their best songs. The arrangement and production is very good, but there isn't really enough happening in the melody for me to consider it one of their best songs. The Fall on the Hill is a very excellent song, the melody is terrific, it's got an interesting arrangement, and Paul McCartney delivers another superb vocal, but it doesn't quite match up to a lot of the Beatles songs in this song's league. Flying was the only instrumental track besides George Martin's film scores that ever got released while the Beatles were together, and this track is very forgettable, and I think it proves just how essential the Beatles' singing was to their music. Blue Jay Way is a pretty good song, it's definitely got a very interesting arrangement, but it's not one of their best songs. Your Mother Should Know was a really great solid track. It's one of the songs that wasn't particularly ambitious and was just tempting to be a really solid track, and it succeeds brilliantly. I Am the Walrus was without a doubt the best song on the EP, but given its nonsense lyrics, this song could have easily have been considered a joke, and if it had been given to just about any other band or singer, it probably would have been considered a joke. But John Lennon sings this song with so much authenticity and genuine passion, and that is enough to convince you that this song is something to be taken seriously. And that is something that we get in pretty much every Beatles song, and it made it nearly impossible for the Beatles to make a bad song, and the only times they did make a bad song was when it was so obviously bad that it was if they were trying to make a bad song, e.g. You Know My Name, Look Up the Number, or they succeeded in what they were trying to do, but what they were trying to do was a problem in itself, e.g. Revolution 9. But this song was neither of those two, and I think this is a superb song. Their next single was Lady Madonna, and this single was made under quite different circumstances to most of their other singles. While most of their singles in the UK were not released on albums, most of them were usually recorded during the sessions for an album, so when they were compiling their singles they usually had a decent number of songs to choose from. But between completing the Magical Mystery Tour EP and releasing Lady Madonna, the Beatles only recorded 4 songs. These 4 songs were Lady Madonna, The Inner Light, Across the Universe and Hey Bulldog. And Hey Bulldog was recorded after they had already decided on Lady Madonna being their next single, so they really only had 3 songs to choose from. I'm saying this because I think this is one of the weakest singles in the Beatles catalogue, and given the small number of songs they had available to them, I kind of understand why that was the case. It's far from bad, and it was a very unique song, and this would have been a great single for just about any other band, but it's a pretty average effort for the Beatles at this stage of their career. I mean, consider this. At least 5 of the songs on Rubber Soul are better than this song. At least 8 of the songs on Revolver are better than this. That's more than half the album. At least 5 of the songs on Sgt. Pepper are better than this song. And B-sides like Rain, Baby You're a Rich Man, I'm the Walrus, and Revolution are better than this. So if the Beatles have more amazing songs than they can put out as singles, I expect the songs that they do release as singles to be the best of the best. So while this would have been a great single for most artists, I expect a little more from the Beatles. But keep in mind that if this song had been an album track and hadn't been released as a single, then I would have had nothing but good things to say about it. Except for the fact that there probably would have been a lot of other songs in the album that was better than this. But anyway, Hey Jude is much better. This song was far less experimental than most of the music they released since Rubber Soul. Instead, this song was all about the emotion. It begins as a simple piano ballad with a great melody and a great vocal. Judging those first 25 seconds on its own terms is nothing short of brilliant, but it does seem a little bit flat at the start when judging it against songs like A Day in the Life and Strawberry Fields with their outstanding arrangements, or even Let It Be and Yesterday given their superior melodies. Now the only reason I'm comparing this song to those other songs is because this was their most successful song back in the day, and I think some people still think that this is their best song, and while it is certainly one of their best, certainly in the top 10, I wouldn't regard it as their best song. This song starts in a very simple and very controlled fashion, and then the song slowly progresses with more instruments coming in, and we get some backing vocals from John Lennon and George Harrison, and then 3 minutes into the song, there is this emotional release and everyone just goes for it. We have brass instruments coming in, Paul does some screaming, and despite the fact that the 4-bar refrain repeats itself over and over for 4 minutes, you just can't get sick of it. But you know what's so insane about the Beatles? I'm sorry, there's no other way I can say this. Revolution, a B-side? I mean, who in their right mind relegates a song as good as this to a B-side? Only someone with an inflood of great music would do this. It was insane enough that John Lennon decided to put Across the Universe on the shelf, but this is just ridiculous. I'm not complaining about the decision, it's just that so many artists would kill to have a song as good as this, and yet the Beatles are like, oh, that's okay, it can go on the B-side to Hey Jude. I mean, are you serious? And I understand that it might have seemed like a B-side compared with Hey Jude, and don't get me wrong, if I was given Hey Jude and Revolution and was asked to make one the B-side and one the A-side, it would have been an easy decision to make Hey Jude the A-side and Revolution the B-side, but it's still amazing to think that a song like this was not even released as an A-side. In fact, possibly the biggest compliment I can give to Hey Jude is that it forced Revolution to be a B-side. This song was probably the best hard rocker they ever did, with its distorted guitar and avant-garde vocals. If it had been released as an A-side and hadn't been released at the same time as Hey Jude, I reckon it would have gone to #1 easily. Anyway, enough of this song, let's move on to their next album. The White Album was their most diverse album. If we're just judging on the amount of highlights and the way the highlights differ from each other in terms of their styles and what makes them great, then this is the best album they ever made. However, this album doesn't have the same consistency that Revolver had. While Revolver was highlight after highlight, great song after great song, here there are many outstanding songs, but there are also some great songs, some just good songs, and then there are those few pieces of garbage. Let's start with the pieces of garbage, because there is absolutely no excuse for these songs, or songs in quotation marks, being on this album. Firstly, there is Wild Honey Pie. Wild Honey Pie is just Paul McCartney playing around in the studio. That's it. No thought went into the song. Paul was just messing around, dumping random stuff on tape and going, hey, that sounds cool. Let's put that on the White Album. Are you kidding me? Now, the next piece of garbage is not really garbage. The arrangement is actually pretty good, and it's performed very well, but why don't we do it in the road is songwriting at its laziest. Paul just came up with some random idea and built a song around it by repeating the same two lines and recycling the same 12-bar blues from every other song ever. And the reason I'm so bothered by this is that I have written tons of these kinds of songs in my lifetime, and they're all no better or worse than this song. For instance, one day I was cold, so I just went, brr, I'm cold, brr, I'm cold, brr, 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 I'm cold. It's the exact same principle. You just come up with a random idea, write a few lyrics to go with it, and build a simple melody around it. Now, among these crappy songs I've come up with, I've also come up with some tunes that might actually be somewhat decent. And I've often had this vision of an album in my head, and every time I come up with a new song, I would be like, oh, I need another song for near the beginning of the album, I could put that there or something like that. And I can honestly say that if I was in Paul McCartney's position and I had just written Why Don't We Do It in the Road, I would never have even considered putting it on the album, let alone the same album that had While My Guitar Gently Weeps, Happiness Is a Warm Gun and Helter Skelter. That's crazy. This is a song that should have immediately been recognised as a joke. So why do some critics consider this song to be greatly simple instead of lazy and stupid? It's because of the authenticity and genuine passion of Paul McCartney's performance. You read the lyrics and you think, this is stupid, but then you hear the recording and you hear the authenticity of the performance and go, oh, maybe not. So at least we can say that the performance was pretty great, but the laziness of the songwriting is inexcusable. If Paul had written a great song with the same arrangement as Why Don't We Do It in the Road, then that might have been really excellent. But this is pointless. The last piece of garbage, and probably the worst track on the album, is Revolution 9. Now, I don't object to Revolution 9 as a work of art. While I've never tried to appreciate this song, sorry, not song, track, I do believe that this track may have its place as a work of art. But as a song, it's garbage. Because it's not a song. I don't think it even constitutes as music. It's a bunch of random noises sequenced together into an 8-minute piece. When I buy an album, I expect to hear a collection of songs, and sometimes I get more than that. I do not expect to hear this. The Beatles are known for being hugely experimental and for breaking away from the conventions of popular music. And that is great, but this is going way too far. It's great that John Lennon wanted to push the boundaries of popular music further, but he has to at least remember that the Beatles are a rock band, not whatever this is. This does not belong here. Anyway, back to the album as a whole. Even with these 3 tracks removed, there still would have been a huge range between the best and weakest songs. So since this is a double album, we have to ask ourselves, would it have been better to shorten this album by removing some of the weaker songs if the purpose was to improve the consistency of the album? What would we have lost by shortening this to a single album, or by making it a 70-minute double album instead of a 90-minute double album, and what would we have gained? So let's go through all the songs on the album. Back in the USSR is a killer track, perfect way to start the album. You know, it's upbeat, rocks hard, it's got that great Beach Boys feel in the middle, you know, brilliant song. Dear Prudence is another killer track, distinctive guitar playing, great vocal from John Lennon, and the way that Back in the USSR leads into Dear Prudence is brilliant. The soft opening to Dear Prudence provides that perfect contrast with the roughness that we get on Back in the USSR. And then in the middle of Dear Prudence, it builds into this sort of power ballad feel, which is really excellent. And it feels at this point like this is going to be like their last 3 albums where the songs really tie in with each other despite the variety of styles. But that kind of goes out the window after the first 2 songs, and it basically just becomes a random collection of songs that happen to have been recorded at the same time and released together, which is in huge contrast to Sgt. Pepper. Now that I think about it, it might actually be useful, instead of going through all the songs in sequence, to instead look at the songs songwriter by songwriter. Let's start with George Harrison. Now, since Revolver, he had only had 3 songs on Beatles records. He had Within You Without You on Sgt. Pepper, which was really great, but not as outstanding as some of his other songs. He had Blue Jay Way, which was good, but not overly great. And then he had The Inner Light, which was the B-side to Lady Madonna, and it was good, but not great. And none of those songs came close to the quality of If I Needed Someone, which was his best song to date by far. But here, not only did he have his best song to date, but he wrote the best track on the album. This is where George officially caught up with the other Beatles. Sure, he may have only had 4 of the 30 tracks, but over the next 2 years, he would write many great songs, and unfortunately many of them were rejected by the other Beatles and weren't recorded until after the Beatles' breakup. While My Guitar Gently Weeps is just a perfect rock song, it's got a great melody, superb vocals, great spirit, great production, that great guitar solo which was contributed by Eric Clapton. It was easily the best track on the album and one of the Beatles' very best songs. Long 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 was a beautiful, haunting ballad. The guitar work was really great, sort of like on Here, There and Everywhere, where we have that electric guitar being used in a very soft song without it sounding like it's contrasting the softness of the song. The other 2 songs, however, I had mixed feelings about. Personally, I'm not much of a fan of Savoy Truffle. I just don't care too much about the way the electric guitar sounds on the song. But this is really just a personal issue. Objectively, I can't really fault it. It's a great upbeat rocker, but probably not one of their best. Piggies I have mixed feelings about because it has a very childish feel to it, and I may just have been imagining it, but when I first heard this album, I felt like I had heard it being covered on a kids show or something when I was really young and didn't realise it was a Beatles song until now, and I wasn't sure that it really belonged with the other songs on this album. And you might wonder why I didn't have the same reaction to Yellow Submarine, but on Revolver they really made the effort to make the songs tie in with each other, and we don't get that on the White Album, so while I like the diversity of styles, some of the songs I wondered whether they were a little out of place, but I think we're going to have to continue this discussion to the end because I had the same reaction to a couple of other songs. Now, Ringo actually had a composition on the album which was Don't Pass Me By. Don't Pass Me By was a really solid track. It was not particularly great, but it is better than the first efforts of the other Beatles, so that's a plus, but it would probably rank in the lower half of all Beatles songs. Now, I'm even going to separate the John songs from the Paul songs because while their songs were always credited as Lennon and McCartney, they were pretty much writing all their songs separately at this point. The exception is Birthday, which was a tune they basically came up with on the spot, so in that sense it's not that different from Why Don't We Do It in the Road. And while they did at least bother to come up with more than 2 lines, the lyrics are very simple. I might as well read them out since there's not much. You say it's your birthday, it's my birthday too, yeah, they say it's your birthday, we're gonna have a good time, I'm glad it's your birthday, happy birthday to you, yes, we're going to a party, I would like you to dance, take a chance, I would like you to dance, I would like you to dance, and then that's the same thing again. You say it's your birthday, well it's my birthday too, you say it's your birthday, we're gonna have a good time, I'm glad it's your birthday, happy birthday to you. Yeah, not very great. However, unlike Why Don't We Do It in the Road, I actually really like this song. I think the difference is that the Beatles knew that Birthday was kind of silly, but they didn't care, so I'm like, okay, well they don't care, so why should I? And you appreciate the silliness of the song, whereas I think Paul McCartney was trying to pretend that Why Don't We Do It in the Road was something more meaningful and serious than it really was. Also, Birthday had some unique elements that turned out to be quite influential, and I think that Birthday was sort of just above that borderline between silliness and stupidity, whereas I think Why Don't We Do It in the Road was sort of just below that borderline. Anyway, all that having been said, it isn't one of the best songs in the album, and so we do have to ask ourselves whether this song belongs with the other tracks on the album and whether or not it disrupts the consistency of the album. But we'll save that to the end. Now let's talk about the John Lennon songs. Obviously he had Dear Prudence, which was really excellent, and then he had Glass Onion, which was good but not great. Compared with the weaker tracks on Revolver and Sgt. Pepper, I would say that it's better than Love You Too and slightly weaker than Benefit of Mr. Kind and Fixing Hole. However, it's far from bad and it does have a distinctive feel to it. The continuing story of Bungalow Bill is very good, although I sort of had a similar reaction to this that I had with Piggies, not because it feels like a kid song, but because it doesn't really sound like a Beatles song, and you think, hang on, aren't the Beatles the band that keeps changing its sound and style, so why is this such an odd one out? Well, I think it has a lot to do with the way that the Beatles sing, because while their voices may have matured and may have been used in a variety of circumstances, their voices did not evolve and change as much as the other aspects of their music, and so that element is what we tend to recognize the Beatles by. After listening to the first 20 seconds of the song, I'm not sure I would have recognized the Beatles had I not known prior to listening to it that it was a Beatles song. They sing with a very unique tone compared with their other music, and I think this is partially due to the fact that Ringo actually sings with the group, which is something that I only recently discovered. Overall, I think it's a great song, but I'm not quite sure how great it is. Happiness is a Warm Gun is one of those songs that changes its tone throughout the song, but unlike other similar songs like Bohemian Rhapsody, A Day in the Life and Band on the Run, all of which were 5 minutes or more, this song goes through 5 stages in less than 3 minutes. The first 14 seconds is the highlight of the song with that great guitar rhythm and a superb vocal from John Lennon. The drumming then comes in and becomes more upbeat, and then we have that very heavy section with the guitar solo and the heavy vocals, and then we have that brief tempo change, and then the last 70 seconds I had mixed feelings about. I liked the melody, but I didn't like some of the vocals on the song. But overall, this song is greater than the sum of its parts, and what they achieved in just a 3-minute track was incredible. I'm So Tired is definitely a great song, but when I was comparing it to the other songs on this album and in the Beatles catalogue, I found that John Lennon's vocal didn't seem to have that magic that he usually delivers on his softer songs, and so I found the soft parts of this song to be boring in comparison with most of the Beatles' output. But I did really like the hard rocking section of the song, but unfortunately that only takes up about a third of the song. Julia is a simple yet beautiful acoustic ballad, really great. Yeah Blues is a really great, very hard rocking song, however its simple melody means it's not as good as the other songs in its league like Everybody's Got Something to Hide, Helter Skelter and Back in the USSR. Everybody's Got Something to Hide Except Me and My Monkey is a really great hard rock song. Now, Sexy Sadie falls into this category where I really like the song and I have nothing but good things to say about it, and there's something in the arrangement that makes it stand out even if it's only small, and it masters those fundamental qualities that I've been saying about the Beatles right from the start, but at the same time, there is nothing much to rave about, and it isn't one of their very best songs, it's just a really solid track. Sexy Sadie is one of those songs. Revolution 1 is the original version of Revolution, which John Lennon wanted to release as a single, but the other Beatles objected on the grounds that it was too slow. While this definitely wasn't commercial enough to be released as a single, it's still nice to hear the song in its original form. While it's nowhere near as good as the official version, it's still got a great emotion and spirit. Cry Baby Cry falls into that same category that I mentioned with Sexy Sadie. It's also one of several acoustic guitar tracks on the album, and although most of these acoustic guitar tracks do add a few other instruments to keep the arrangement interesting, I felt that some of the weaker songs in this category could have been removed to maintain the album's consistency. However, only 2 of these acoustic guitar tracks are sung by John Lennon, and this song is more up-tempo than Julia, so I think this is one of the more indispensable songs in this category. Good Night is another song I had mixed feelings about. Like Piggies, it's very much a children's song, and it felt like the kind of song that would be sung at the end of a children's program when all the characters are going to bed or something, and it didn't help that Ringo Starr's vocal reminded me of Kermit the Frog. And so I'm not sure this really works as the closing track to an album where most of the songs have a lot of musical and lyrical sophistication. As a standalone track, however, it works very well. Now on to Paul's songs. Obla Di Obla Die is a really great song. It's on that level where there's nothing distinctive that wows you, but at the same time there's nothing to fault about it. So there's nothing much to say other than it has a great melody, a great vocal from Paul McCartney, and a distinctive feel to it. Martha My Dear is in that same category as Sexy Sadie. Blackbird is a brilliant acoustic ballad, probably the best ballad on the album and one of the best songs on the album period. Rocky Raccoon is a really nice mid-tempo song, although it's probably one of the weaker tracks on the album. I Will is a very nice acoustic ballad and falls into that same category as Sexy Sadie. Mother Nature's Song is one of the standout ballads on the album. Helter Skelter is one of the earliest heavy metal songs and is one of the rawest and most energetic songs to be released by the Beatles at this stage in their career. Honey Pie is a really nice mid-tempo song, although it's not really anything special when compared with the other songs in the album, and it feels very similar to Rocky Raccoon, which I also wasn't overly impressed by. They're not bad by any means, but it's songs like these that make this album not as consistent as it could have been had they removed these songs. So, wow, there is a lot to digest in this album. It is clear that this album is not as consistent as Revolver and doesn't have the same unification between the songs that Rubber Soul and Sgt. Pepper had, but it is also by far their most diverse album, which can be both a good and a bad thing. I think the biggest criticism you can give to this album is that it felt like everything the Beatles came up with during 1968 was included on the album without giving any thought to how good or bad the song was or how it would fit into the rest of the album. And that is the only reason that Wild Honey Pie and Why Don't We Do It in the Road made it onto the album. Does that make it weaker than their last three albums? Possibly. It's certainly weaker than Revolver, but I'm going to say something about their five masterpieces, which is that they differed in terms of what made them great. Rubber Soul was great because of its consistency and diversity while maintaining a sense of unity between the songs. Revolver was great because it provided the most perfect balance of consistency and diversity. Sgt. Pepper was great because it was groundbreaking on many levels and it was a complete statement rather than just a collection of songs, and it had their very best song on it. And now the White Album is great because of the amount of great material and the diversity between the songs. So while it is true that they could have taken the best songs and made an album that had the same level of consistency and diversity that Revolver did, this album provides a different kind of experience, which has its own benefits. Some people prefer Revolver because of its consistency, while others prefer the variety of songs that the White Album has to offer, even if they have to listen to some weaker songs in between the outstanding songs, especially since most of the weaker songs are pretty great and have their own unique joys. So I have no objections to the decision to make this a double album, but please, if you happen to come up with something like Why Don't We Do It in the Road or Wild Honey Pie, please don't record it, or at the very least don't release it to the public. Before we conclude this very long White Album review, I need to make mention of those songs that seemed a little out of place on the album. I think that after what I've just said about the fact that their masterpieces were great for different reasons, I don't have a problem with those songs. Again, it's all about personal taste. However, I do think they could have perhaps had a more appropriate closing track than Good Night. In conclusion, the Beatles had 5 masterpieces, and this is definitely one of the 5.